Sometimes you just got to run and look behind you and say, everybody who wants to run, but I can't stop running because you're not doing it. Listen to me, hear me. You can't stop chasing your dream just because somebody in your life will chase it. You can't stop believing in yourself just because somebody in your life will believe in you. You can't stop chasing the dreams of your life just because when you know when you do it, you're going to have to do it all by yourself.
Good morning, learners. How are you all doing today? I hope you're ready for another edition of English Live. Today is going to be a special lesson that's aimed maybe at our slightly younger learners. So maybe Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, but of course, Key Stage 3 and adults and people all over the world, you're all very welcome to join in any of these live lessons on YouTube. So a few things first. I will talk about the tasks in a moment, but first of all, some hellos. So hello to Sarah, who is 11, to Emily, who is 5, who is in Abingdon, who is watching with her sister, to Joanna and Fabio, who are watching in Portugal with their dog Bruno. Hello, Bruno. And hello to Tony in Gravesend, to Digby, who is 11 in Portsmouth, to Ella Sutton, who never misses a lesson. Ella, that's great. I'm glad. I bet you're learning lots. And hello to Lucy in Dickens Heath, Ellie in Barnwell, apologies. Izzy, who is 9 in Barnsley, and Hattie and Joe, who are 9 in Bristol. Lots of you joining in today. That's absolutely fantastic. I hope you're going to enjoy this lesson on structuring stories. So, this may be the first time that you're joining an English live lesson, especially if you're a Key Stage 1 learner. Your parents might only just have found out that I'm doing these every weekday at 11 a.m. So if you are new, just a little reminder to you that after the lesson, or you might have done it already, you can go to my Facebook page group called English Live Resources and download a PDF that looks a little bit like this. And it has 6 different tasks on it that are aimed at all different learning styles and abilities and needs to extend and consolidate the learning that we do in this lesson today. So this is just going to be a 20-30 minute lesson. And then you can pick 1 or 2 or all of these follow-up tasks to do afterwards. Okay, so that is on the Facebook group. And you can also afterwards post pictures of your work in that group. I always do try to have a quick look every evening after my own children have gone to bed and leave some comments and some feedback. But it's also really nice if you and your adult to help you can go through and leave some positive feedback on other learners' work as well. It's really nice that you're all building this learning community together. Okay, so let's get started. Every lesson we have a short starter activity, and today is no different. So today I am asking you, how many fictional characters can you think of in 1 minute? You can write them down, or you can discuss it with your siblings or your adults or parents that are learning with you today, or you can just shout them out at the screen. That's absolutely fine. And I know lots of you are enjoying the music, so you can even have a little dance and a bop along whilst you're doing it. Okay, I'm going to give you that 1 minute from now. Off you go. Play.
You can't wait for their affirmation. You can't wait for their approval. You can't wait for their support. Sometimes you just got to run and look behind you and say, everybody wants to run, but I can't stop running because you're not going to do it. Listen to me, hear me. You can't stop chasing your dream just because somebody in your life will chase it with you. You can't stop believing in yourself just because somebody in your life will believe in you. You can't stop chasing the dreams of your life just because when you know if you do it, you're going to have to do it all by yourself.
Pause. Okay, I'm chuckling a little bit here because I just sneezed, as you probably heard, and my mum just sent me a text message to say thank you and bless you. Thank you, Mum. So, did you come up with lots of fictional characters? Hopefully you did. Hopefully you got your brain moving around a little bit, and now you're ready to start thinking about how you structure your stories so that they are interesting to the reader and so that they make sense. Okay, now writing a good story includes lots of different elements, from how you structure your sentences to the vocabulary you use to your interesting ideas, to the feelings that you create, to how you connect with your reader. But today we're going to focus on the plot, so how you structure the story to get from the beginning to the middle to the end. Now, some of the younger learners, you're probably used to the concept of having a beginning, a middle and an end, but we're going to extend that a little bit today, and we're going to separate our stories out into 5 different sections. Okay, so when you have your story, the 2 main components are your characters and your plot. So your plot is another word for how you move through the beginning to the end of the story. Now, if you want to do some extra work on characters, I did a Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 2 lesson 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's currently available on Facebook, but I will try and get that one up onto YouTube in the next couple of days, because that's a really nice one to develop your ideas for your characters. But as I said, we're now going to focus on the plot of the story. So the plot of your story is the events. And when we talk about the plot, we're talking about 2 things. We're talking about the chronology, so how the story moves in order. Is it in the correct time order? Does it have flashbacks to things? And also the narrative, so the story, the way the story unravels. Okay, now the first thing that you will have in your story is called the exposition, or you can call it the beginning, or you can call it setting the scene. That's completely up to you. What we're going to do today, I'm going to separate this lesson out into 2 different tasks as we move through. So if you're a younger learner or you're not very confident with structuring stories, I'm going to ask you to base the tasks on the story of Little Red Riding Hood. So we all know this story. I often use fairy tales because we all know them and we're confident with them. So you can base it on Little Red Riding Hood. If you're quite confident with structuring stories and you want this as a refresher, you can come up with your own story as you go along. So, the exposition is setting the scene and the background for your characters, introducing your characters, and generally giving the reader all the information they need to know before your story really kicks off. Okay, so I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes now. You can either come up with some exposition ideas for a new story, or you can list the exposition of Little Red Riding Hood. So it'd be the characters, where it is set, and any other key information you think the reader needs to know before the story kicks off. Okay, off you go. Play. did you get along? How did you do? Have you come up with some ideas for your own story, or were you coming up with the exposition details for Little Red Riding Hood? Well, I've got a few hellos before we move on to the next of those 5 stages of structuring a story. So hello to Lara in Wandsworth, to Kai in Switzerland. Kai, I did a couple of ski seasons in Switzerland, fabulous country. To Ophelia in Essex, to Megan in London, to Aaron and Rajan, to Maya and Alex, who came up with 23 different fictional characters in 1 minute. Great team effort for that. That's really impressive. And to Sophie in Amersham, who hasn't missed a lesson. And Safa, you put that you came up with 30 great book ideas over the last couple of lessons that you want to publish. Well, Safa, I will look out for your books in the bookshops when they reopen. So let's get on with the next stage. So we've got our exposition, we've set the scene for our story, and now we need to create some action. And this is called the rising action. It's as the story gradually builds up. So rising action. I'm going to bring this a little closer for you. There we go, yeah. So the rising action, this includes the events that are leading up to the main problem, the main incident that happens in the story. So again, you can come up with your own rising action, or you can list what you think the rising action may be for Little Red Riding Hood. Remember, at this point, you're introducing some sort of problem that one of your characters needs to somehow overcome, okay? Or some sort of conflict that they need to pass through to come out successfully on the other side, okay? Right, you've got about 1.5 minutes to do this. Off you go. Good luck. Play.
You can't wait to be what you've been told. You can't wait on their affirmation. You can't wait on their approval. You can't wait on their support. Sometimes you just got to run and look behind you and say, everybody who wants to run, but I can't stop running because you're not running. Listen to me, hear me. You can't stop chasing your dream just because somebody in your life is chasing it. You can't stop believing in yourself just because somebody in your life is believing in you. You can't stop chasing the dreams of your life just because when you know you can do it, you're going to have to do it all by yourself.
Okay. Did you work out what the rising action was for Little Red Riding Hood, or did you come up with your own idea for your own story of the rising action? So if you were talking about Little Red Riding Hood, the rising action might be at the point where where Little Red Riding Hood arrives at her grandmother's house. The wolf is in there, dressed in grandma's clothes, and they have that whole conversation that starts building up the tension. Okay, so when Little Red Riding Hood says, "What great big eyes you have, Grandma," and the wolf says, "All the better to see you with." So that conversation in that fairy tale would be what we consider the rising action. Now, if you're doing a plan for your own story, one thing that you can consider to really structure an interesting story and maybe go a bit beyond just those 5 different stages would be a subplot. So a subplot is maybe some other smaller story that is running along concurrently with the main story. So in terms of Little Red Riding Hood, it might be something like Little Red Riding Hood is battling with her confidence after being bullied at school, and she doesn't feel confident. And maybe the outcome at the end of the story could be that, as part of your subplot story, that she develops the confidence that she needs because she has overcome a face-to-face with a wolf, for example. Okay, so that's something to consider if you're trying to go a bit beyond those 5 stages. Okay. So before we move on to the next stage, hello to Ashley and Taylor in Year 5, who are twins, who are watching for the first time. Welcome, Ashley and Taylor. I hope you're enjoying it. And hello to Lucy, who is 8 in Petswood in Kent, to Haritika in London, to Mia, who is 10, to Abdullah and Ibrahim in West London. And my mum said, say hello to Faye in York, who is joining for the first time with her au pair Molly, that my mum saw in the comments. So hello to you, another first timer, and a massive hello to everybody who is joining for the first time. You can see all of my previous lessons from Easter onwards on YouTube, and all of the ones before that are still on Facebook, but gradually they will move across to YouTube as well. Okay, so let's get on. We're now looking at stage number 3 in structuring our stories. So this part of the story, the climax, that's where we get to the highest point of the story, where the action all takes place, and we find out whether the main character, okay, your hero in the story, your protagonist, whether they are able to overcome the problem that you introduced in the exposition or in the rising action. Okay, it might be a battle, it might be winning a competition, it could be anything, but it is the most important point of the story before we start to tie up the loose ends. Okay, so again, I'm going to give you about a minute and a half to jot down some ideas if you are doing your own story, and if not, then you can discuss or write down what you think the climax of Little Red Riding Hood would be. Okay, so this is the 3rd stage. A minute and a half, off you go. Okay, play.
You can't wait on their affirmation. You can't wait on their approval. You can't wait on their support. Sometimes you just got to run and look behind you and say, everybody who wants to run, run. But I can't stop running because you're not running. Listen to me, hear me. You can't stop chasing your dream just because somebody in your life is chasing it. You can't stop believing in yourself just because somebody in your life will believe in you. You can't stop chasing the dreams of your life just because when you know when you do it, you're going to have to do it all by yourself.
Bertie, you going to come and say hello today? Come on. Pause. Okay. How did you do? Did you come up with a climax for your own story, or did you work out what the climax was in the story of Little Red Riding Hood? Hopefully you got some ideas down. Hopefully you're starting to see now the shape of a story. So we start off with the exposition, the rising action, the climax, and now we're going to start working our way back down. Okay, so a story is a bit like a mountain, and that's quite important to remember when you're structuring a story, so that you don't go waffling off in all strange directions, or you don't have something that's interesting for somebody to read. Couple of hellos now. So many of you are tuning in for hellos. I absolutely feel obliged to get as many in as I can. So hello to Rashim in Pakistan, to Darcy in Essex. Hello, Darcy. Hello to Jacob in Dursley, to Kyron in Kent, and to Yasmin and Lena in Manchester, who are regulars and always do the most wonderful performance work and post it in the English Live Resources group. So Yasmin and Lena, it's lovely to hear that you're tuning in today. Looking forward to seeing your stories. So the climax of the story we've done that. Now we're going to move on to stage number 4. And this is the falling action. So we had the rising action, the climax, and now the falling action. Okay, so this action will be less, it will have less tension, less suspense, and it's where the characters in the play are resolving the problem. Okay, so it's where everything is being made right. Okay. Put these bits of paper in here. So it can come as part of the climax and immediately after the climax, and it's about solving the problems and dissolving any problems and moving forward and the outcomes from that. Okay, so have a think about what that might be in terms of your own story, or even in Little Red Riding Hood. Okay, and do pop some of your ideas in the comments, because I'd love to share your ideas and not just the shout outs. Okay, 1.5 minutes for you. Off you go. Play. Pause. How did you do? Have you got some notes written down? I hope you have. Well, Joshua and Kieran in West Yorkshire, they are thinking of a story they're going to write later. Are you doing it together or separately? Are you brothers? Be an interesting story to see, especially if you work together on it, a bit of a team story. So hello to Aliska and her mum Marketa who are watching, to Savannah who is 9 in California. Hello. And you've been here since day one apparently, so I hope you're enjoying the lessons. And Darcy is going to write a story about lockdown. If you write a story about lockdown, you never know, it might be really famous one day. Given that this is a very interesting period of time in history. And hello to Thor in Brighton. I love Brighton, Thor, what a lovely place to be. And hello to Arabella as well. I hope that you're enjoying the lesson. So the falling action. What comes next? Well, I said that there were 5 stages and that is number 4. So we're coming to the very last stage now, just in time because we're almost at the end of the lesson. So the resolution. Okay. So the resolution is how things end up in the story, how things are left, what happens to the characters afterwards. Is it a happy ending or is it a cliffhanger? Okay, there are different ways that you can have an ending on your story. And sometimes if you have a cliffhanger, you can leave it so that you can then write a sequel, so a book or a story that follows on and tells the next story or what happens next. Okay, I'm going to give you just a minute now to write down what you think the resolution of Little Red Riding Hood could be, or to come up with an idea for your own story. Okay, 1 minute, off you go. Play.
You can't wait to be what you've been told. You can't wait on their affirmation. You can't wait on their encouragement. You can't wait on their support. Sometimes you just got to run and look behind you and say, everybody who wants to run, but I can't stop running because you're not running with me. Listen to me, hear me. You can't stop chasing your dream just because somebody in your life is chasing it. You can't stop believing in yourself just because somebody in your life will believe in you. You can't stop chasing the dreams of your life just because when you know when you do it, you're going to have to do it all by yourself.
Pause. Okay, so that's the resolution part then. That's the end of your story. So just to illustrate to you what your story might look like, as I explained earlier, it's like a mountain. So it's a story mountain. You have your exposition where you explain the background and your characters, your rising action, so the events that lead up to the main problem, your climax, and then your falling action, and where the problems are all resolved. And then your resolution is how things are left at the end of the story. So if you can construct a story in this style, it's going to have a really good beginning, middle, and end, and it's going to make sense. Okay, and it's going to be interesting for your teachers and your family and your friends to read. So lots of you have been asking to see Bertie again. This is becoming a regular thing on the end of each lesson. If you're new to my lessons, Bertie is my dog, and he's been very quiet today, but often we hear him scratching or whinging or just being a bit of a nuisance in the background. But I have started bringing him in for a quick hello. So Bertie, it's your big moment. Are you ready? Here he is. Bertie, you're going to say hello to everybody? Hello. Hello, everybody. Okay, so from me and Bertie, have a lovely afternoon. Enjoy doing the task work. Remember, the sheets are available on my English Live Resources group, and you can pick any of the tasks on there. Do post pictures of your work afterwards so Bertie and I can have a little look at them. And I will see you tomorrow for the Spellathon, which is Key Stage 1 to 4. And of course, adults, parents, friends, cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone can get involved and you can have a good bit of healthy competition before the weekend. Okay, Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye. Play.